and Ranking Member Norton for holding this important conversation. I want to applaud members on both sides of the aisle who've demonstrated our bipartisan commitment on this committee to trying to fix the Highway Trust Fund and to discuss some of the issues around that and put our country on a sustainable path towards infrastructure investment. My first question is for Mr. Schroer. I want to thank you for your testimony. I was in another committee hearing earlier, but I read the written testimony, and for AASHTO's continued work to highlight our needs for infrastructure investment across the country. I appreciate AASHTO continues to include a freight bill user fee in its matrix of revenue options highlighted in Exhibit 2 of your written testimony. As you may know, I have also introduced a bipartisan legislation that would implement this sustainable freight user fee to finance a freight trust fund. The DOT estimates that my plan would send over $100 million a year just in formula funding to freight priorities in Tennessee. What do you think you and your colleagues across the country could do with these kinds of resources to improve goods movement?
Well, in Tennessee, no question, as I mentioned earlier, we have 9 interstates that travel throughout our state and heavy truck traffic. And we are concerned about being able to fund those and add capacity on those roads for the increased freight movement. And it does, we worry about safety of passenger vehicles and an increased movement of those throughout our state. So money that can be used for freight movement is critical. We actually have hired several people in our department to only look at freight movement and projects that we can do that will enhance the movement of freight throughout our state. So it's a critical piece for Tennessee and across this country.
Talking about a dedicated freight revenue stream, a user fee. Mr. Lewis, what about in Colorado? Could you use that money?
Oh, absolutely, Congressman. I think, we established something called a Freight Advisory Committee about 18 months ago that brought in our partners in the trucking industry, shipping companies, the rail industry, to talk about what are those priorities. I mean, just think of the geography of Colorado. The Continental Divide that separates the Front Range from the Western Slope, the whole western 2/3 of the state, all fuel, motor fuel, heating oil, aviation fuel, to get to the Western Slope has to cross over the Continental Divide at a pass at 12,000 feet, has to go rain or snow, and that's the path that we access the whole western part of the state. If we're just not able to grow the economy unless we're able to do something about that weak link in the transportation system, and that is true throughout the state. So dedicated freight revenues are critically important to the economic growth of the state.
Mr. Speer, I appreciate your comments in your written testimony about a freight waybill fee and the creation of a multimodal freight program. You know, I understand the concerns of the trucking industry about the collection of this fee, the potential for evasion or diversion, and the use of revenues collected by the trucking industry for other transportation modes. I understand those kinds of concerns. I personally believe we can overcome these issues by working with you and the ATA and other stakeholders that actually support this proposal to craft a final proposal that addresses these concerns that you have raised. Would you be willing to work with us on that?
It's a much better alternative than litigation, so yes.
Also, it's sustainable, what we're talking about, and doesn't have the issues of the Highway Trust Fund, which is not a sustainable funding trust fund.
Well, it could be. It could be, and that's up to you. We're here to help you. We're certainly united in helping you get that done. But I do feel that the provisions that you put into the FAST Act on having freight plans, more oversight, not just to the states, but to the DOT, and reviewing those freight plans. As I said in my testimony, in my opening statement, we lose as an industry $63.4 billion a year sitting in congestion. For passenger vehicles, that exceeds $100 billion. These are measurable numbers.
Right.
And so having good freight flow, good freight plans are the starting point. You saw that in the FAST Act. Now we need to really keep the feet to the fire and make certain these plans are implemented and funded.
And I agree with you, I concur with you, and as I yield back, I think we should follow the money again here, too. We have to have a sustainable funding stream. And so with that, I yield back.
Mr. Schmucker.
Thank